Leo and Harry went to the dilapidated entrance of the smaller house. A cluster of nail holes was all that remained of a long-gone door knocker. Leo struck the door with his knuckles in a controlled hammer, when he longed to kick it down with the full force of his impatience. In a moment, the door creaked open, and Leo was faced with the pale and undernourished countenance of William. The young man's eyes dilated in alarm as he recognized Leo. Had there been any color to his complexion, it would have leached out at once. He tried to close the door again, but Leo shouldered his way forward, grabbing William's wrist. Leo forced it upward and surveyed the blood-stained bandage on his hand. Blood on the bed. The thought of what this man might have done to Kat ignited a rage so violent that it obliterated every other awareness. He stopped thinking altogether. A minute later, he found himself on the floor, straddling William's body and battering him mercilessly. He was dimly aware of Harry shouting his name and endeavoring to pull him off. Alerted by the fracas, the bully stormed through the doorway and launched at him. Leo flipped the heavier, larger man over his head, causing his body to slam to the floor with an impetus that shook the house to its frame. The bully lurched to his feet, and his fists, the size of Sunday roasts, whipped through the air with bone-crushing force. Leo leaped back, raising his guard, then jabbed forward with his right. The bully blocked him easily. Leo, however, did not fight according to the London prize ring rules. He followed with a side kick to the kneecap. As the bully bent over with a grunt of pain, Leo delivered a fouet, or whip kick, to the head. The bully toppled to the floor, right at Harry's feet. Reflecting that his brother-in-law was one of the dirtier fighters he'd ever seen, Harry gave him a short nod and headed into the empty receiving room. The house was eerily vacant, quiet except for Leo's and Harry's shouts as they searched for Catherine. The place reeked of opium smoke, the windows filmed with such thick grime that curtains were entirely unnecessary. Every room was shrouded in filth. Dust upon dust. Corners clotted with webs, carpets blossomed with stains, wood floors scarred and buckled. Harry saw a room upstairs where lamplight oozed into the hallway shadows, filtering through a miasma of smoke. He took the steps 2 and 3 at a time, his heart hammering. The form of an old woman was curled on the settee. The loose folds of her black dress couldn't conceal the stick-thin lines of her body, gnarled like the trunk of a crabapple tree. She appeared only half-conscious, her bony fingers caressing the length of a leather hookah hose as if it were a pet serpent. Harry approached her, put his hand on her head, and pushed it back to view her face. "Who are you?" she croaked. The whites of her eyes were stained, as if they had been soaked in tea. Harry struggled not to recoil at the smell of her breath. "I've come for Catherine," he said. "Tell me where she is." She stared at him fixedly. "The brother." "Yes, where is she?" "Where are you keeping her?" "The brothel?" Althea let go of the leather hose and hugged herself. "My brother never came for me," she said plaintively, perspiration and tears seeping through the powder on her face, turning it into a creamy paste. "You can't have her." But her gaze chased off to the side, in the direction of the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. Galvanized, Harry rushed from the room and up the stairs. A blessed waft of cool air and a ray of natural light came from one of the 2 rooms at the top. He went inside, his gaze sweeping across the stagnant room. The bed was in disarray and the window had been thrown open. Harry froze, sharp pain lancing through his chest. His heart had stopped with fear. "Kate?" he heard himself shout, running to the window. Gulping for air. He looked down at the street 3 stories below, but there was no broken body, no blood, nothing on the street below except rubbish and manure. At the periphery of his vision, a white flutter caught his attention, like the flapping of a bird's wings. Turning his head to the left, Harry drew in a quick breath as he saw his sister. Catherine was in a white nightgown, perched on the edge of a winged gable. She was only about 3 yards away, having crept along an incredibly narrow sill that was cantilevered over the 2nd story below. Her arms were locked around her slender knees, and she was shivering violently. The breeze played with the loose locks of her hair, glittering banners dancing against the gray sky. One puff of wind, one momentary loss of balance, would knock her off the gable. Even more alarming than Catherine's precarious perch was the vacancy of her expression. "Cat," Harry said carefully, and her face turned in his direction. She didn't seem to recognize him. "Don't move," Harry said hoarsely. "Stay still, Cat." He ducked his head inside the house long enough to shout, "Ramsay." And then his head emerged from the window again. "Cat, don't move a muscle. Don't even blink." She didn't say a word, only sat and continued to shiver, her gaze unfocused. Leo came up behind Harry and stuck his own head out the window. Harry heard Leo's breath catch. Sweet Mother of God. Taking stock of the situation, Leo became very, very calm. "She's as high as a piper," he said. "This is going to be a pretty trick." Chapter 31, "I'll walk along the sill," Harry said. "I'm not afraid of heights." Leo's expression was grim. "Neither am I. But it won't hold either of us, too much stress on the trusses. The ones above us are rotting, which means they probably all are. Is there another way to reach her? From the third-story roof? That would take too long. Keep talking to her while I find some rope." Leo disappeared, while Harry hung farther out the window. "Cat, it's me," he said. "It's Harry. You know me, don't you?" "Course I do." Her head dropped to her bent knees, and she wobbled. "I'm so tired." "Cat, wait. This isn't the time for a nap. Lift your head and look at me." Harry continued to talk to her, encouraging her to stay still, stay awake, but she barely responded. More than once she altered her position, and Harry's heart plummeted as he expected her to roll right off the winged gable. To his relief, Leo returned in no time at all with a substantial length of rope. His face was misted with sweat, and he was drawing in deep lungfuls of air. "That was fast," Harry said, taking the rope from him. "We're next door to a notorious whipping den," Leo said. There was a lot of rope. Harry measured 2 spans of rope with his arms and began to tie a knot. "If you're planning to coax her to come back to the window," he said, "it won't work. She won't respond to anything I say. You tie the knot. I'll do the talking." Leo had never experienced fear like this before. Not even when Laura had died. That had been a slow process of loss, watching her life slip away like sand from an hourglass. This was even worse. This was the deepest level of hell. Leaning out the window, Leo stared at Catherine's huddled, exhausted form. He understood the effects of the opium, the confusion and dizziness, the sense that one's limbs were too heavy to move, and at the same time a feeling of buoyant lightness as if one could fly. And added to that, Catherine couldn't even see. If he managed to get her to safety, he was never going to let her out of his arms again. "Well, Marks," he said in as normal a voice as he could manage. "Of all the ridiculous situations you and I have found ourselves in, this one takes the biscuit." Her head lifted from her knees, and she squinted blindly in his direction. "My lord?" "Yes, I'm going to help you. Stay still. Naturally, you would make my heroic rescue effort as difficult as possible. I didn't plan on this." Her voice was slurred, but there was a familiar and welcome touch of indignation in it. "Was trying to get away. I know. And in just a minute, I'm going to bring you inside so that we can argue properly. For the time being, don't want to." "Don't want to come in?" Leo asked, puzzled. "No, don't want to argue." She lowered her head to her knees again, and gave a muffled sob. "Christ," Leo said, his emotions nearly getting the better of him. "Darling love, please, we won't argue. I promise. Don't cry." He took a shuddering breath as Harry handed him the rope, looped with a perfect bowline knot. "Cat, listen to me. Lift your head and put your knees down just a little. I'm going to throw a rope to you, but it's very important that you not reach for it, do you understand? Just sit still and let it fall into your lap." She held obediently still, squinting and blinking. Leo let the loop swing a few times, testing its weight, estimating how much line to allow. He tossed it in a slow, careful motion, but the loop fell short of its mark, bouncing off the shingles near Catherine's feet. "You need to throw it harder," she said. Despite Leo's desperation and bone-deep anxiety, he had to bite back a grin. "Will you ever stop telling me what to do, Marks?" "I don't think so," she said after a moment's reflection. He gathered up the rope and tossed the loop again, and this time it caught neatly on her knees. "I've got it." "Good girl," Leo said. He fought to keep his voice calm. "Now, put your arms through the circle and lift it over your head. I want it to go around your chest. Not too fast. Keep your balance." His breath quickened as she fumbled with the loop. "Yes, just so. Yes. God, I love you." He let out breath of relief as he saw that the rope was in place, fitting just above her BRSTS and beneath her arms. He gave the other end of the rope to Harry. "Don't let go." "Not a chance." Harry quickly tied it around his own waist. Leo's attention returned to Catherine, who was saying something to him, her face drawn with a frown. "What is it, Marks? You didn't have to say that." "I didn't have to say what?" "That you love me." "But I do." "No, you don't. I heard you say to win that." Catherine paused, struggling to recollect. "That you would only marry a woman you were certain never to love." "I often say idiotic things," Leo protested. "It never crossed my mind that anyone actually listens to me." A window opened in the brothel next door, and an annoyed prostitute leaned out. "There's girls what's tryin' to sleep in air, and you're shoutin' fit to wake the dead." "We'll be finished soon," Leo called back to her, scowling. "Go back to bed." The prostitute continued to lean out. "What are you doing with a girl on the bleedin' roof?" "None of your business," Leo said curtly. A few more windows opened, and more heads stuck out, with incredulous exclamations. "Ew, is he? Is she going to jump? Gore, what a filthy mess that would be." Catherine didn't seem to notice the audience they had attracted. Her squinting gaze fastened on Leo. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "What you said?" "We'll talk about it later," Leo said, straddling the windowsill, holding on to the frame. "For now, I want you to put your hand against the side of the house and step onto the sill. Carefully." "Did you mean it?" Catherine repeated, unmoving. Leo gave her an incredulous glance. "Good God, Marks, do you have to be stubborn now, of all times? You want me to declare myself in front of a chorus of prostitutes?" She nodded emphatically. One of the whores called out, "Go on and tell her, dearie." The others joined in enthusiastically. "Go on, love. Let's hear it, Ansem." Harry, who was standing just behind Leo, was shaking his head slowly. "If it will get her to come in off the blasted roof, just say it, damn it." Leo leaned farther out the window. "I love you," he said shortly. As he stared at Catherine's small, shivering figure, he felt his color run high, and his soul open with an emotion deeper than he had ever imagined could reside in him. "I love you, Marks. My heart is completely and utterly yours. And unfortunately for you, the rest of me comes with it." Leo paused, struggling for words. When they had always come so easily to him. But these had to be the right words. They meant too much. "I know I'm a bad bargain. But I'm begging you to have me anyway. Because I want the chance to make you as happy as you make me. I want to build a life with you." He fought to steady his voice. "Please come to me, Cat, because there's no surviving you. You don't have to love me back. You don't have to be mine. Just let me be yours." "Oh." One of the prostitutes sighed, another blotted her eyes. "If she won't have him," she sniffled, "I'll take him." Before Leo had even finished, Catherine had gotten to her feet and was creeping to the sill. "I'm coming," she said, slowly, Leo cautioned, tightening his grip on the rope as he watched the movements of her small, bare feet. "Do it exactly the way you did before." She inched toward him, her back to the wall. "I don't remember doing it before," she said breathlessly. "Don't look down." I can't see anyway. That's just as well. Keep moving. Gradually Leo gathered the excess rope, as if he were reeling her in. Closer and closer she came, until she was finally within arm's reach. Leo stretched his hand as far as possible, his fingers trembling with effort. Another step, another, and then he finally had his arm around her, and he dragged her inside. Cheers erupted from the brothel, and the multitude of windows began to close. Leo sank to the floor with his knees splayed, his face buried in Catherine's hair. Tremors of relief ran through his body, and he let out a shuddering sigh. I have you. I have you. Oh, Marks. You've just put me through the worst 2 minutes of my entire life. And for that you're going to spend years atoning. It was only 2 minutes, she protested, and he choked on a laugh. Fumbling at his pocket, he pulled out her spectacles and placed them carefully on her nose. The world became clear again. Harry knelt beside them and touched Catherine's shoulder. She turned and put her arms around him, hugging him tightly. My big brother, she whispered. You came for me again. She felt Harry smile against her hair. Always. Whenever you need me. Lifting his head, he glanced ruefully at Leo as he continued, You'd better marry him, Cat. Any man willing to put himself through that is probably worth keeping. It was with the greatest reluctance that Leo surrendered Catherine to Poppy and Mrs. Pennywhistle when they arrived back at the hotel. The two women brought her to her room and helped her to bathe and wash her hair. She was exhausted and disoriented, and infinitely grateful for the soothing attention. Clad in a fresh nightgown and dressing robe, she sat before the fire while Poppy combed out her hair. The room had been cleaned and tidied, the bed changed and freshly made. The housekeeper left with an armload of damp toweling, allowing Catherine and Poppy some privacy. There was no sign of Dodger anywhere. Remembering what had happened to him, Catherine felt her throat clench in grief. Tomorrow she would ask about the gallant little creature, but for now she couldn't quite bring herself to face it. Hearing her sniffle, Poppy reached around to give her a handkerchief. The comb moved gently through her hair. Harry told me not to bother you with this tonight, dear, but if it were me, I would want to know. After you left with Leo, Harry stayed behind until the police came to your aunt's house. They went upstairs to find your aunt, but she was dead. They found raw opium paste in her mouth. Poor Althea, Catherine whispered, pressing the handkerchief against her welling eyes. You're very kind, to have any sympathy at all for her. I'm sure I wouldn't. What about William? He ran off before they could arrest him. I heard Harry and Leo discussing it. They're going to commission a runner to find him. I don't want that, Catherine protested. I want them to let him go. I have no doubt Leo will agree to whatever you ask, Poppy said. But why? After what that dreadful man did to you. William was a victim, as surely as I, Catherine said earnestly. He was only trying to survive. Life was brutally unfair to him. And to you, dear. But you made something far better of it than he did. But I had Harry. And I had you and your family. And Leo, Poppy said, a smile in her voice. I would say you have him without question. For a man who was so determined to go through life as an observer, he's certainly been pulled back into the stream. Because of you. Would you mind if I marry him, Poppy? She asked almost timidly. Poppy hugged her from behind, and rested her head briefly against Catherine's. I'm sure I speak for all the Hathaways in saying that we would be eternally grateful if you would marry him. I can't imagine who else would dare to take him on. After a light supper of toast and broth, Catherine went to bed and dozed for a while, waking every now and then with a fearful start. Each time she was reassured to see Poppy reading in a chair by the bed, her hair gleaming like mahogany in the glow of lamplight. You should go back to the apartment, Catherine finally mumbled, not wishing to seem like a child afraid of the dark. I'll stay a little longer, came the soft answer.